paid team lead for a software engineering department. Not a manager, more like the guy who knows how all the pieces fit together. Our team was a well-oiled machine. 8 of us in total, all guys, had been working on the company's core product for years. We weren't just colleagues, we were a unit. We could solve a catastrophic server failure at 3 a.m., fueled by nothing but cold pizza and a shared sense of gallows humor. The work was complex, the pressure was high, and we loved it. Our department consistently had the highest performance metrics in the entire company. We were the guys they called when something was truly broken and millions were on the line. The unspoken leader of our group was Demir. He was the oldest guy on the team, probably in his late 50s. A man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Demir had been writing code since before I was born. His approval, a simple slow nod after you explained a solution, was worth more than any bonus or praise from the higher-ups. We had a rhythm, a system based on merit and mutual respect. Life was good, predictable, productive. Then the email landed in our inboxes. A corporate announcement about a strategic leadership reorganization. Our old boss, a decent guy who mostly left us alone because he knew we delivered, was being promoted to a position where he couldn't do any real work. His replacement was someone from outside the company. Her name was Louisa. The email was full of corporate buzzwords about her visionary leadership and her background in fostering inclusive and dynamic workplace cultures. A few of the guys chuckled. We'd seen these types before. They usually came in, changed a bunch of stuff that wasn't broken, then left a year later for a better paying job, leaving us to clean up the mess. We figured we'd just keep our heads down, keep delivering results, and wait her out. We were wrong. Her first day she called an all-hands meeting for our department. She walked in with a practiced smile, looking sharp in a business suit that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't ask about our current projects. She didn't ask about our technical challenges or our recent successes. She launched directly into a prepared speech. It was a masterpiece of corporate nonsense. She spoke about her mission to deconstruct the existing paradigms and challenge the structural biases inherent in the tech industry. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each of us. Then she said the line that made the air in the room turn cold. Frankly, I'm concerned by the lack of diversity here. A team that is this homogeneous is a liability. It's a sign of a deeply ingrained cultural problem, one that my tenure here will be dedicated to rectifying. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. We all just looked at each other. We weren't a homogeneous liability. We were the most effective team in the company. I glanced over at Demir. He was just sitting there, completely still, his face an unreadable mask. But I could see the slight tightening around his eyes. The meeting ended with her telling us to expect a new era of accountability and change. The next few weeks were a slow crawl into madness. First came the mandatory workshops. We were all forced to attend multi-hour sessions on toxic masculinity in the workplace. A consultant, a woman who had never written a line of code in her life, explained to us how our problem-solving approach was adversarial, and our direct communication style was a form of microaggression. She told Demir, a man with 4 decades of experience, that his tendency to quietly analyze a problem before speaking was an example of weaponized silence. We had to sit there and nod as she explained that our entire professional dynamic, the very thing that made us so successful, was fundamentally toxic. Louisa sat at the back of the room during these sessions, smiling and nodding, as if we were all being enlightened. After the workshops, she started meddling with our process. Our daily stand-up meetings, which used to be a quick 10-minute sync-up on technical blockers, were transformed into 45-minute emotional check-ins. We had to talk about our feelings regarding the project. Any attempt to steer the conversation back to technical specifics was met with a gentle reprimand from Louisa about privileging technical discourse over human-centric collaboration. Our productivity, for the first time in years, started to dip. I tried to talk to her about it. As team lead, it was my job. I brought charts, performance data, project timelines. I showed her, in black and white, how the new processes were creating bottlenecks and causing delays. She looked at the data, then looked at me with an expression of pity. She explained that I was looking at the wrong metrics. The real success, she said, wasn't shipping a product on time. It was creating a psychologically safe and equitable environment. She suggested that my resistance to her changes was a sign of my own discomfort with relinquishing privilege. It was like talking to a brick wall that called you a bigot for pointing out it was a wall. Then came the announcement of her big initiative, the one she called the Future Leaders Mentorship Program. It sounded noble enough. The reality was something else entirely. Louisa informed us that she had personally hired 3 new junior engineers to join our team. We were in the middle of a critical infrastructure overhaul and desperately needed senior-level help. But we were hopeful. The new hires arrived a week later, 3 young women, all fresh out of school. One of them was Peyton. She seemed nice enough, genuinely eager, but you could tell she was completely overwhelmed. Her resume showed a degree in a field barely related to what we do, and a 3-month coding boot camp. She was being thrown into one of the most complex software environments imaginable. It was a recipe for disaster. Then, Louisa dropped the other shoe. In another team meeting, she announced the structure of the mentorship program. It wasn't optional. Every single man on the team was being assigned a mentee. Our primary job function was no longer engineering. It was training. Furthermore, our performance reviews, our bonuses, our very job security would now be tied directly to the progress of our assigned mentee. She said it was our responsibility to lift up the next generation of women in tech and actively work to dismantle the boys' club that she believed our team to be. The guys were stunned. We weren't teachers. We were builders, fixers, problem solvers. We were now being told that our decades of collective experience were valuable only in so far as we could transfer them to a handful of unqualified new hires. I was assigned to mentor Peyton. The first few weeks were excruciating. I would spend 8 hours a day trying to explain fundamental concepts that were prerequisites for even being considered for a job on our team. While I was drawing diagrams of basic database architecture for Peyton, critical alerts were pinging on my monitor from the systems I was supposed to be managing. I'd have to tell her to wait, quickly patch a production server that was about to go down, then return to explaining what a SQL join was. It was untenable. The whole team was going through the same thing. One of our best network engineers spent a whole week trying to teach his mentee how to properly configure a firewall, a task he could have done himself in 20 minutes. Demir was paired with a young woman who, according to him, argued that his coding style was patriarchal because it was too rigid. He didn't argue. He just sat there, looking at his screen, the life slowly draining from his eyes. Our team's velocity ground to a halt. We went from deploying major features weekly to barely being able to fix minor bugs. Client satisfaction plummeted. We started getting angry emails from other departments, asking why systems were suddenly so unstable. Cade had to spend most of his time in meetings, trying to explain the delays without throwing Louisa under the bus, which was becoming increasingly difficult. Louisa, meanwhile, was treating the program as a landmark success. She was sending out company-wide emails celebrating the vibrant new energy in our department. She took pictures of us working with our mentees and featured them in the corporate newsletter under the headline, "This is what change looks like." She was completely insulated from the reality of the situation. In her mind, the chaos and failure were just the necessary side effects of progress. The atmosphere on the team had changed completely. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a shared, quiet frustration. Lunches became the silent affairs. The jokes stopped. We were all just tired of fighting a battle we couldn't win, tired of being told our competence was a form of oppression. One evening, a few of us were working late. A major system had crashed, and it was all hands on deck. The mentees had all gone home hours ago, of course. It was just the original team, the 8 of us, huddled around a monitor, trying to undo the damage caused by a bug that had slipped through because our code review process was now a mess. We finally fixed it around midnight. We were exhausted sitting in the dark office, the only light coming from the server rack LEDs. One of the younger guys, a brilliant engineer named Mark, just put his head in his hands. He said, "I don't know how much longer I can do this. I feel like I'm not even an engineer anymore. I'm a full-time tutor for someone who doesn't want to learn, and I'm being punished for it." Nobody said anything for a long time. Then Demir, who had been silent the whole night, spoke. "A good tool in the wrong hands is just a piece of metal," he said, looking at the server rack. That was it. That's all he said. But we all understood what he meant. We were the tool, and we were in the wrong hands. The situation came to a head a few months after the program started. We had a huge company-defining product launch scheduled. It was a project the team had been working on for over a year before Louisa arrived. It was our baby. In the final weeks leading up to the launch, it was clear we weren't going to make the deadline. The core logic was buggy, the infrastructure was unstable, and the whole thing was held together with digital duct tape. The reason was simple. The senior engineers who had designed it were now spending 80% of their time mentoring. I called an emergency meeting with Louisa. I laid it all out for her. I told her that, best case scenario, we needed to delay the launch by 6 months. Worst case scenario, the product as it stood would fail spectacularly, potentially costing the company millions and damaging our reputation beyond repair. I recommended we pause the mentorship program immediately and put all 8 senior engineers back on the project full-time. Louisa listened to my entire presentation without interruption. When I was finished, she smiled. Not a friendly smile. It was condescending, dismissive. She told me that she was disappointed in my failure of leadership. She said that a true leader would see this as an opportunity for the mentees to step up and take ownership. She accused me of trying to sabotage her program because I was threatened by strong, capable women. I was speechless. I had just shown her irrefutable proof that her policies were about to sink a flagship product, and she turned it into a personal attack on my character. She then said that not only would she not be pausing the mentorship program, she would be doubling down on it. The launch would proceed as scheduled, and she expected the mentees to be the ones presenting the final product at the launch event. It was a declaration of war. She wasn't just incompetent. She was actively trying to set us up for failure to prove her ideological point. I walked out of her office and went straight to the team's area. I told them everything. The look on their faces was something I'll never forget. It was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and finally, a strange kind of calm. The calm that comes when you realize you have no other options. The launch was 2 weeks away. We didn't try to be heroes. We didn't pull all-nighters to try and save the project. We knew it was pointless. Instead, we did exactly what we were told to do. We mentored. We patiently answered questions. We walked the new hires through the code they didn't understand. We watched as they, with the misplaced confidence of inexperience, made critical mistakes. We documented everything. Every bug they introduced. Every warning we gave that was ignored. Every time we suggested a correct approach and were overruled by a mentee who had read a blog post and thought they knew better. Payton, to her credit, seemed to realize she was out of her depth. She came to me one afternoon, looking worried. She said, "Cade, are you sure this is ready? I ran a test, and the main data processor seems to be dropping about 30% of its packets." I looked at her and said, "That's a very good observation, Payton. You should bring that up with Louisa. It's your project now." She knew something was wrong, but she was too intimidated by Louisa to push back. The day before the launch, Louisa sent out a meeting invitation. The title was Final Team Alignment. The attendee list was interesting. It was just the 8 original male engineers. None of the mentees were invited, not even Payton. We all filed into the conference room. The mood was somber. We knew this was it, the end of the line. Louisa walked in, beaming with pride. She was practically glowing. She started the meeting by congratulating us. "Gentlemen," she began, "I want to personally thank you. What you have accomplished over these past few months is truly revolutionary." We just stared at her. She went on, "You have successfully transferred your institutional knowledge to a new, diverse generation of talent. You have proven that men can be powerful allies in the fight for workplace equity." She paused for dramatic effect, letting her words hang in the air. "Your mentees are ready. They are the future of this department, and now we have reached the final, most important phase of this transition." She looked at each of us, her smile unwavering. "To truly complete this cultural reset and make space for the new talent you've so wonderfully cultivated, I need you to take one last step. I need you to demonstrate the ultimate act of allyship. I expect all of your letters of resignation on my desk by the end of the month." There was a profound, ringing silence in the room. It wasn't an empty silence. It was heavy. We were 8 men who had spent years communicating in grunts, nods, and technical shorthand. And in that moment, we were having the most articulate conversation of our lives without saying a single word. I looked at the guy across from me, another senior engineer. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a kind of stunned clarity. Louisa's smile was still plastered on her face, but it was starting to look strained. She had expected applause, or at least a solemn, respectful acceptance of her decree. She was getting nothing, just the dead, flat sound of a ventilation fan. The air was thick with unspoken contempt. She had just asked us to spend months of our lives training our own replacements, only to commit professional suicide for the sake of her ideology. She didn't see us as people, as engineers who had dedicated our careers to this company. She saw us as a statistic, a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. The first to move was Damir. He didn't sigh, he didn't make a sound. He simply blinked once, slowly, as if waking from a long dream. Then, with a deliberation that felt ancient and powerful, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out his company ID badge. It was attached to a worn lanyard, the plastic scuffed from years of use. He didn't throw it. He didn't drop it. He leaned forward and placed it gently in the exact center of the polished conference table. The small clatter of the plastic hitting the wood echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. He looked directly at Louisa. His face was calm, impassive. He held her gaze for a solid 3 seconds. In his eyes, there was no anger. There was something far worse. Complete and total indifference. He had already written her off. Then he pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. The spell was broken. The second engineer, a quiet guy who handled our database architecture, followed suit. He took off his badge, placed it next to Damir's, and walked out. Then the third, and the fourth. It became a silent, solemn procession. Each man stood up, placed his badge on the growing pile on the table, and left the room. No shouting, no arguments, no dramatic speeches. It was a quiet, unified, and absolute rejection of everything she stood for. Louisa's face had gone through a rapid series of transformations. The confident smile had vanished, replaced by a twitching, confused frown. Her eyes darted from one man to the next as they stood and left. A flicker of panic entered her expression, followed by a flash of indignant rage. She finally found her voice when there were only 3 of us left. "What do you think you're doing?" she stammered, her voice an octave higher than usual. "This is incredibly unprofessional. This is insubordination." The 5th man ignored her completely, placed his badge down, and walked out. Now it was just me and one other guy. "You can't just walk out," she screeched, standing up from her chair. "You are part of a critical project. You have a responsibility." The 7th engineer calmly put his badge on the pile. It now looked like a small, sad monument to our careers. He walked out. I was the last one. I stood up. Luisa's eyes were locked on me, wide and desperate. She looked like a general whose entire army had just vanished into thin air. "Cade, don't you do this," she pleaded, her corporate mask completely gone, replaced by raw panic. "You're the team lead. You need to show some leadership. You need to control your men." I looked at the pile of badges on the table. Then I looked at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt an immense sense of pity. She had no idea what she had just destroyed. She thought leadership was about giving orders and enforcing ideology. She didn't understand that the loyalty our team had was earned, not mandated. It was a bond forged in late-night deployments and shared victories, something her MBA could never teach her. "They're not my men to control," I said, my voice sounding calm and distant to my own ears. "And you're right. I do need to show some leadership." I took off my badge and added it to the pile. Then I turned and walked out of the conference room, closing the door softly behind me. The 7 other guys were waiting in the hallway. No one was talking. We just stood there for a moment, a group of suddenly unemployed engineers. Damir gave a single decisive nod. And just like that, we all walked over to our desks. We didn't make a scene. We didn't pack up personal belongings. We didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. We simply logged out of our computers, picked up our jackets, and walked towards the exit. The 3 mentees were sitting at their desks, looking utterly bewildered. Payton stood up as I walked past. "Cade, what's going on? Where's everyone going?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I looked at her, and for a second, I felt a pang of sympathy. She was just a kid, caught in the middle of a war she didn't even know was being fought. "Louisa has an announcement," I said. "I'm sure she'll explain everything." We walked out of the building, past the security desk, and into the afternoon sun. It felt strange. I had walked out of that building thousands of times, but this time was different. It felt final. We stood in the parking lot for a moment. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was a text from one of the guys. Beer? A chorus of phones buzzed. We all ended up at a dive bar a few miles from the office. We sat in a booth, and for the first hour, nobody really talked about what happened. We talked about everything else. Sports, movies, stupid internet videos. It was as if we all needed to decompress, to remember what it was like to be normal people and not pawns in someone's corporate game. Then, the phone started ringing. First mine, it was Louisa. I silenced it and put the phone face down on the table. Then, another guy's phone rang. It was HR. He silenced it. One by one, our phones rang. Louisa, HR, the director of our division. We all ignored them. We made a pact right there in that booth. No one talks to them. No one answers. We left as a team. We deal with the fallout as a team. Our quiet act of defiance had turned into a full-blown strike. We found out later what was happening back at the office. Louisa, after her initial shock, had apparently gone into full damage control mode. She called an emergency meeting with the 3 mentees and told them that the senior team had been let go due to their inability to adapt to a modern, inclusive workplace. She told them that this was their chance to shine, that the company was now theirs to lead. She probably believed it too. The first sign of trouble came about an hour after we left. A critical automated process that managed data backups failed. It was a finicky system that Demir had built years ago. He was the only one who truly understood its quirks. An alarm started blaring in the server room. The mentees, according to an anonymous email I got from a friend in another department, started to panic. They had no idea what the alarm even meant. Louisa, in her infinite wisdom, told them to just turn it off. It's like telling a fire crew to just unplug the smoke detector. Things escalated from there. By the end of the day, the unstable code for the new product launch had started to cascade into other systems. The bug Payton had noticed, the one that was dropping 30% of data packets, turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. The new code was so poorly integrated that it was actively corrupting the main user database. The monitoring dashboard, which we normally kept a pristine green, apparently lit up with so many red and yellow alerts that one of the mentees thought the monitor itself was broken. The next morning, the day of the big launch, the entire company was in chaos. The product wasn't just delayed, the entire platform it was built on was now unstable. Customers were calling, complaining that their data was missing, or that the service was down entirely. Louisa was apparently running around the office, shouting at the mentees to fix it, as if fixing a multi-million-dollar software platform was something you could do by trying to turn it off and on again. She was trying to call us, over and over. Voicemails filled up. Desperate emails were sent, first demanding we return to the office, then pleading. We ignored them all. We were at another bar, watching the disaster unfold through secondhand text messages and emails from sympathetic colleagues. It was a strange feeling, vindicating, but also sad. We had built those systems. We had poured our lives into them. Watching them burn was like watching your own house catch fire. But we knew we couldn't go back. The foundation was rotten. The climax came around noon. The owner of the company showed up. He was an old-school guy, the man who had started the company in his garage 30 years ago. He was mostly retired, only coming in for major events. He had planned to be there for the triumphant launch of the new product. Instead, he walked into a war zone. He saw the panic, the red alerts on every screen, and the complete absence of his entire senior engineering team. He was a sharp guy. He knew something was fundamentally wrong. He found Louisa in her office, where she was apparently on the phone with the company's lawyers, trying to figure out how to sue us for abandonment. The owner walked in and hung up her phone. He asked her one simple question. What happened? Louisa, cornered and desperate, made her final fatal mistake. She lied. She launched into a tirade about how the male engineers had sabotaged the launch. She claimed we were bitter and resentful of the talented young women she had brought in. She said we had staged a toxic coordinated walkout to undermine her authority and prove that women couldn't succeed without men. She painted herself as the victim of a misogynistic plot. The owner listened to her entire speech patiently. When she was done, he looked at her and said, "So, The 8 most dedicated, highest-performing engineers in this company, some of whom have been here for over 2 decades, all decided to throw away their careers on the same day, right before the biggest product launch in our history, just because they don't like you. The logic was so simple, so undeniable, that it cut through all of her corporate jargon. She started to stammer, but the owner held up a hand. He pulled out his own phone. "Let's find out," he said. A moment later, my phone rang. The caller ID was a name I hadn't seen in years. The owner. I looked at the guys. They all nodded. This was the one call we had to answer. I picked it up. "Hello? Cade," the owner's voice was calm and steady. "I'm in Luisa's office. I've put you on speakerphone. Can you please tell me, in your own words, why you and your entire team resigned yesterday?" I took a deep breath. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just stated the facts, calmly and professionally. "Yesterday afternoon, Luisa held a meeting with the 8 male engineers of the department," I began. "She thanked us for training our replacements over the past few months. Then she told us that, as a final act of allyship, she expected us all to submit our resignations by the end of the month to make room for more diverse candidates." I paused. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "We were told our work here was done," I continued, "so we complied with our manager's request and resigned, effective immediately." I didn't need to be in the room to imagine the scene. I had presented a simple, verifiable sequence of events. There was no room for interpretation. There was a long silence on the phone. Then I heard the owner's voice, no longer calm. It was cold as ice. He wasn't talking to me. "Get out," he said. I heard Louisa's voice, shrill and panicked. "What? You can't. I have a contract. You have 5 minutes to clear out your desk," the owner's voice boomed through the phone. "If you are still in this building after 5 minutes, I will have security escort you out. You are fired. Get out of my company." I heard a sob, and then the sound of a door slamming. The owner came back on the line. His voice was weary. "Cade," he said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea this was happening." "We know," I said. "You've always been fair with us." "I need you back," he said bluntly. "I need your whole team back. The platform is in shambles. This is a complete catastrophe." "I don't know," I said honestly. "A lot of damage has been done." "Whatever it takes," he said, his voice firm. "I'm authorizing an immediate 20% salary increase for every single one of you, effective today. All of those ridiculous HR initiatives are gone. The mentorship program is terminated. The new hires will be reassigned to a proper entry-level training program where they belong." He took a breath. "And once you get the system stable, the whole team gets a full month of paid vacation, on the company. Go somewhere warm. I don't care. You've been through hell." I looked around the table at the guys. They were all listening, their expressions a mix of shock and vindication. I saw Demir give another one of his slow, deliberate nods. That was all the answer I needed. "Okay," I said into the phone. "We're on our way." We walked back into that office like a conquering army. The atmosphere was electric. People from other departments were staring. The news had already spread. We ignored them. We walked straight to our old desks, which were exactly as we had left them. The server room alarm was still blaring. The monitors were all still red. We logged in, and we got to work. It took us less than 3 hours to stabilize the entire platform. Demir fixed his backup system in about 10 minutes. Another guy patched the database corruption. I rolled back the buggy code from the new product. By the end of the day, the alarms were silent. The monitors were green. It was like it had never happened. We saw Paytine on our way out. She looked small and defeated. She came up to me and said she was sorry. She said she had no idea what Luisa was planning. I told her it wasn't her fault. I told her to stick with the real training program and she'd be a fine engineer one day. She actually looked relieved. The next Monday, all 8 of us were on a plane to Hawaii. The company paid for everything. We spent the next month doing absolutely nothing related to computers. It was the best work trip I've ever been on. We heard through the grapevine what happened to Luisa. After being fired, she apparently rebranded herself. She's now a successful diversity and inclusion consultant. She hosts webinars and gives keynote speeches about her experience, bravely confronting a toxic patriarchal culture in big tech. Apparently, she uses our story as a case study. I guess in her version, she's the hero. I don't really care. She can have her story, I have mine, and I have my team. And that's all that matters.